Pleasant good morning to one and all, and welcome to our webinar on opportunities for the gaming industry, present and future trends. And we have today our presenter, which is Jay Powell. I'm sure you would have read his short bio, which he gave you. He'll also speak some more on himself. Unfortunately, there was a power outage in the Dominican Republic, so our moderator is presently not on. She was on and then dropped off. So she would be with us soon. She'll be back with us soon. In the meantime, I will take the ship. So on behalf of our partners, and first of all, Caribbean Export would like to welcome you. And on behalf of our partners, International Trade Center, UK Aid, the Caribbean Network of Service Coalitions, and the CARIFORUM Directorate, who's also a part of us. We'd like to welcome you to this webinar. We know the importance of the gaming sector, and I may have jokingly joking about it over the COVID period, but you know, so many persons under lockdown have gotten into all of the gaming, and it's all about whether it is Netflix or the games and so forth. So I think that we know the opportunity that the sector had, and now I think it's even more important, and the opportunities are even more present in terms of what can be had in the gaming industry. So from the Caribbean Export and our collaborators, we think it's really timely for us to have this discussion, and we know of the upcoming event that Jay would speak of, that we could get you gamers on board, and that we can hear from you and Jay can hear from you, and we know what's happening here within the Caribbean, what's happening within all the region, all persons who are participating, so they can best craft our interventions and see how we can facilitate the development or the further development of the gaming sector. It's not a new area that Caribbean Export has worked in. We have done some work with the youth when we brought them to Chile in 2016 to one of the ALES conference. So, and we saw the potential there. What was interesting coming out of that meeting is that many of the gamers did not know each other existed, and saw the need for that networking, and how that coming together, collaboration and with each other could have gotten you better into the gaming industry or into the gaming world. So we hope that, you know, also coming out of this webinar series, that be a great amount of networking among the gamers within the region. So without much further ado, let me, Tiana is back on. Thank you. Let me get her, sorry. Okay, just hold on 1 second. Let me get Tiana back on.
I can
you can start, and I'll get Tiana on. Yes. Mm-hmm.
So it's great to virtually meet everyone. I did get the pleasure of going down to Lima for the ALS conference last year, and now I'm just don't need to go down to the Caribbean for one this year. But my name is Jay Powell. I've been on the business side of video games now for 20-some years, 20 plus years. I've worked as a agent in my early days up through a publishing company. I've done work with developers, a production studio, and now consulting. So for the entirety of my career, you know, I've always focused on simply just the business side of it, you know, helping developers find publishers, helping publishers find developers, working with licenses, you know, a wide variety of things. But at the end of the day, you know, it's all on the business and licensing stuff. So I want to go through, and even before Tiana gets back on, I have a cheat sheet of some stuff that she sent me earlier so I can start. And she says she wanted to give an overview of the video game industry, and I'm like, okay, well, this is going to be all day. That's going to be a very, you know, big event. But, you know, even just touching on what Allison said about, you know, everyone coming together and discovering everybody exists. COVID has, and this sounds horrible to say, but it's in many ways the truth. COVID has been really good for the video game industry. Obviously, when everyone is confined home, they aren't going out and going to movies, and television and movie production basically stopped. in the midst of all of this. And so we have seen a gigantic influx of money into the game industry. There are publishers that we talk to that within the first couple of months of the lockdown, we're talking about a 500% increase in revenue. And I said, so what have you done different? And they said, nothing. We have done exactly what we were doing pre-COVID, but with everyone being at home now, we're seeing tons of money come in. I have a good friend who works with one of the real world casino companies that's on digital. You're playing the slot machines on an iPad, but you're playing for real money. And he called me, I guess it was on a Tuesday, and said, did the US get their stimulus checks yesterday? And I'm like, I don't know, I hadn't looked. And I looked and I said, yeah, we did. Why? He said, because we saw a giant spike in revenue out of nowhere just in the US yesterday. And so it's been one of, with all of the bad that goes along with COVID and the coronavirus, and we're still under lockdown here in the US and not exactly sure when that's going to change. But there has been a big increase. And with that comes new companies coming into the industry. There are existing companies trying to grow, and it's a mixed blessing, because if you're a new company trying to get in, now you're competing with not only the ones who have always been here, but the ones, who are also coming in and it's new. So it's a bit of a mixed bag, but overall, in terms of the revenue and the money we're seeing come into games, it's been a gigantic spike. So that's the big change that COVID has brought. In terms of, so one of the things next questions was, if you want to export your games and services, as somebody new, how do you find, these companies? And so one of the things I want to talk about is basically that coming together for the companies, all the companies in the region, because this is what we see globally. Anytime there is a government support in this area, things like these webinars and things, it's a huge help. But a lot of times, I worked with the Manitoba province in Canada several years ago, and they were, they had a decent game ecosystem going on, but they were looking to grow it. And one of the key things is the studios speaking to one another, because they were on good terms, they worked together, they knew that in some cases one studio may be looking at a pitch that they can't quite cover all on their own, or they know if they have help they got a better chance of getting it. And so these studios will work together. In order to do that, it's obviously different when you're in different islands and you have to get to different countries to do it. I realize that the market's a little more spread out than the city of Winnipeg is, which is pretty much the entire province of Manitoba. But it's about getting on and working in terms of having a Discord server set up. If you don't have a Discord server and you're creating your own game right now, you need to get it up and going as soon as possible. Doing meetups, working with the IGDA, having that communication pipeline together is absolutely, having that communication pipeline and being able to work together to build off each other's strengths and weaknesses is absolutely key for getting some of these, bigger contracts in and getting folks, interested in your company and in the region. So one, yes, anything that you can do to be working together and be communicating, know each other exists, know what each other's working on. If it's trade secret stuff, obviously keep that secret, but you're going to get a much better effect for the region as a whole when the teams are communicating and speaking to one another. Now, when it comes to how to find the buyer, so first you have to understand who your buyer is. And so if you are building your own game, obviously you're going to be looking to either publishers or to investors. And those are really two different pitch deck strategies, everything across the board. Publishers are going to want to invest in your game. Investors want to invest in the company. There's different things that you need to show there when you're talking about how to pitch and all that kind of good stuff. If you're an art company or you're just doing server backend engineering, you're going to have a different set of targets. I mean, those are going to range from in some cases publishers, I mean, depending on the publisher, but often cases you've got a much wider market because there are a lot of developers now who have grown to the point, especially with all the money coming in with COVID, but have grown to the point that they're not able to do everything on their own. And so they'll be looking to have outsourced work as well. The digital conference space is something that is an absolute plus for you to have access to. We look at GDC, which is the one that everybody used to go to, and even for me in the States, if I wanted to send one person to GDC for the week, after we get done buying hotels, flights, tickets, passes, all that kind of good stuff, $5,000-$10,000, because it's absolutely astronomical what San Francisco is in terms of cost. And then all the contracts with the Moscone Center jack the prices up. It's like, if you really want to get angry, look at one of the major hotels and your rate for the week of GDC, and then try to book a room 2 weeks earlier or 2 weeks later and see what the difference is. It's a 3 to 4 multiplier in terms of how they jack the rates up. So early on in COVID, somebody had an article that I saw and I responded to on how, with the lack of trade shows, this is going to be horrible for indie developers. And I disagree vehemently on that. You can, when we sat down in June and started looking at all the digital conferences that were popping up, and, disclaimer, we've been running digital conferences since 2019. So I was chuckling under my breath a little bit, because I spent all of last year yelling that you need to pay attention to these things. They're cheaper and they're more accessible, and no one learned to listen until February. But you could go to, when we mapped out all of the digital events that were happening between June and the end of August, you could literally attend every single one of them for less than one person going to GDC. So these are fantastic opportunities for you as developers and folks that are trying to get into the industry and even learn about the industry to get that chance. And Tiana, if I haven't sent you, I will send you a code for like a huge discount on ours in the next week or two, or I'll send you the code before that, but it is happening in the next week or two. What you want to do is attend as many of these as possible, and a lot of them are free. And you want to go through and learn who's going to be there, because that intelligence gathering, that research is just as important as anything else. You've got to find out who's there, who's talking, build that database internally, so then you can sit down and say, okay, here are the targets that I'm going to go after. And the beauty of these events is they will absolutely say exactly what they're looking for. If you are an art studio looking for contract work, then they can, they'll be able to look and say, you can sort by that. Pardon 1 second. My son's Switch had to be sent off, and I think it's arrived. So he's going to come in and give this to me. All right, buddy. I'll look at it later. All right.
It said TJ Powell.
Okay. Thanks, buddy. We have been waiting on that with bated breath for 2 weeks, and so he's been literally sitting by the door waiting for that to get here. So you want to go through, and can I share my screen?
Yeah. Yes, please.
Where is that option?
You have in the presentation, maybe if it's there, then because we have a mix of people. We have people, of course, gamers, games developers that are really into the industries, but we also have people from the organizations that support gamers, and we may not be as knowledgeable about the sector as the developers themselves. So do you have an information about the size of the market and talking about
massive? So going back this year, it's expected to be worth $90 billion. And depending on when they ran that latest statistic, I would argue that it could be even higher, because like I said, with COVID and everything that's coming in, it's been a gigantic increase in revenue. So you're looking at $90 billion, 2.5 billion gamers, which again, that's the latest round of statistics, which has probably gone up. One of the big misconceptions still to this date is that the majority of the gaming market is 18 to 24-year-old males. That's not true. The majority of gamers are female over the age of 35 because
What? Really?
Yeah. So, all right, I'll ask you, do you consider yourself a gamer?
No, I don't.
Do you
But
have Candy Crush on your phone?
I play on my phone some games, of course.
There you go. That's exactly why. You know, we saw a gigantic increase about 10 or 12 years ago in casual games on PC. The hidden object genres, Bejeweled, all of these original things. And then when they went to phones, well, everybody had a phone. And so I remember distinctly sitting in a theater show with my wife, and there were literally two elderly nuns sitting beside us. And before the show started, one of them pulled out their phone and started playing Candy Crush. And I was like, we win. We have officially got full saturation. So you have billions of gamers around the world, but the majority of them aren't actually, you know, young men. It's women 35 and older. And that's the reason that you've seen so much growth in the mobile market and how everything went free to play. It's literally a whole different world than the traditional game market where you're just dealing with PC console, you know, software sales.
Okay.
Did you have another question?
You want to share your screen? Yes, go ahead.
Oh, yeah. So I was actually trying to get that up. So what I want to show you is how you can actually do that work. So what I'm pulling up is the my account on our upcoming event. Catches, I
Yes.
have to get to my account and not the,
we have a chat box, so if you have questions, you can write it in the chat box, and I will ask to Jay. Also, Jay, you talk about the ecosystems in Canada, and I think it's important because the industry is so underdeveloped in the Caribbean. How important it is to have the right ecosystem. I remember in ALES last year, there was somebody also from Montreal talking about the experience of what Montreal has done and how supporting that industry had transformed the economy of Montreal.
All so, right, so can you see my? I can't see what you can see on my screen, so I don't know which screen.
Yeah, I can see meet to match.
Is it this one?
Yes.
Okay.
We can see. Good.
I have two monitors, and so I can't tell which one it's actually showing. So when we're talking about going in and doing your research for these things, even if you're not you're not taking meetings, the Meet to Match is who we use for our side. And when I say it's easy to find the people that you're looking for, this is what I mean. So if you are a developer, company activities in this case, and each different meeting system, and there's Meet to Match and there's Pine, and then GDC has one that's inherently horrible on their side. You can't find anyone in it, but that part's going to change. But for this one in particular, so if you're doing development and you're looking for outsourcing, well, no. You're publishers and developers and looking for outsourcing, and you search. So here's 150 companies right now that are looking for some sort of outsourcing support, and it may be art, it may be, you know, sound, it could be server backend. There's a whole lot of other, you know, stuff in there that you can look and see. But, you know, one of the other things that you can do if you're a developer, and even if you're just looking at this from a research standpoint, one of the things that we always talk about in our How to Find a Publisher webinar is you want to get an understanding for, you know, who is looking for what platforms and what budget. And budget is hard to get sometimes, but you can go into Meet to Match and say you're looking for publishers that are, willing to fund things up to 50 to 250K, and you can check all of these, however you want to do it. And when you search, it's going to tell you, here are the companies that are willing to, publish these games in that range. And so when it comes to these digital events, it's very easy to sit down and just do basic research even before you get into doing the meetings and that sort of stuff. So that's basically what I wanted to show you, is just how you can go through these digital events and figure out who you need to be talking to. One of the things I always tell our clients is, when you send that email, so if I want to meet with Ben's a friend of mine, you can go in, you can learn what they're doing, and then you request a meeting, you pick the day, and there'll be a little email thing that you can put in there that says what you want to talk about. You always, always, always want to create a Calendly link or some other system that lets you, Calendly hooks to my actual Gmail calendar. And so I can send that link to somebody and it shows them exactly when I'm available, and you can set the parameters on something. That when you're requesting meetings at these conferences, always put an option that says, hey, look, if you're busy, let's schedule something outside of the show. That way you don't get cut off because if, here's the meeting slots that I've got available. When we get closer to the event, that's going to get filled up. But if someone actually wants to save time, always give them an option to request something outside of the show. And the other thing to keep in mind, if you've gone, for those of you who have gone to Gamescom or GDC or any of these traditional events, that if I'm 2 weeks from the show and my calendar is this empty, that's weird, because people tend to book things 2 to 3 months in advance. When we're looking at GDC, typically the real in-person GDC, that's in mid-March. We start planning our clients' meetings in January because people's schedules start filling up. When you're dealing with digital events, it all happens the week before. And as someone who runs them, that is so frustrating, because we will watch our attendance be like flat or gaining a little bit, and then it's like a hockey stick. It just goes straight up the week before. So if you get in there and you start scheduling meetings now, it's fine. But the other thing to keep in mind is, even if you start scheduling meetings 3 days before the digital event, you're still fine. You don't have to worry about it. So anyway, all right. So what was the next question that you had, Tiana?
Well, I have two questions. So taking back, one is about the ecosystems, about what do you think are those elements to foster the development of the industry that we need to put in place if we want to really develop the sector? What kind of, is it financing, if it's training, if it's what are those elements that you see has worked in Canada and in other places?
So Canada is notorious, and I love my Canadian friends, but they are absolutely notorious for tax credits. And I have frequently joked that you could move to Canada and open a studio and never spend a dime, because between the different grants that they have and the tax credits, it's the only place I know where the different provinces actually compete with each other in tax credits and trying to recruit companies to come to their province. But not every country can do that. The reality is, what developers and what early stage companies need is promotion. They need help getting to these conferences. So we see a lot of groups with either the IGDA or the local trade organizations within the countries subsidizing trips to go to these shows, or they'll buy a booth that features a lot of different studios, because it is. PAX released their digital show, and they want to charge an indie developer $4,000 to have a digital booth, and it's absolutely infuriating that they do that because it's just a cash grab. But when you're talking about a physical event, you can go to any of the major events and you'll see entire areas where it's nothing but trade organizations from various countries all the way around the world, and they will buy the booth space, set it up, and they subsidize the trips, either 100% or 50% or something, to help these groups get there and meet, because that's what they need to do. You're not going to be able to grow internally. You've got to be able to get your studios in front of the rest of the world and show, why they're better, what advantages you have versus other studios and things like that. And, that's when a lot of market research comes into it as well. What is the median price range or salary range for someone in the Dominican Republic versus here in the US or in the UK or in Eastern Europe? Understanding where your development costs are going to fit in, is key to it as well. But the big thing, tax credits are wonderful. Not every country can do them. Even our country doesn't do them. Some states do it here in the US, but not on the federal level. But, Canada is different. They're awesome about that. But tax credits, if possible. But more importantly, it's being able to get the studios and the different companies, no matter what they're doing, if they're in the game space, get them together, have them talking collectively, and then helping them be promoted as an entire region to these shows, because it's going to help them, get in front of more companies, and it's much more cost effective to do it that way.
If I'm a young developer, when do I think I'm ready to, do I need to have just a prototype and then I can start contacting others, or do I need to develop a game before? At what stage am I say? Because we have, for example, Trinidad and Tobago has been very good in having animation training. They have developed that curriculum at school, and now they are moving to also having video games specifically. But you have studios that are doing other things, but developing video games is like, their dream. They are doing it slowly, but it's costly to spend the time to develop a full video game, to have the team dedicated to that. So when would you say, what is the minimum, let's say, what do I have to have before I can start exploring those markets, those opportunities?
All right, so first thing, and my soapbox here, if the schools are teaching art and code and anything else with the objective being a video game certificate, they need to absolutely, without a doubt, include at least a course on business, marketing, and production. And worst case scenario, you can blend business and marketing together. But the biggest problem that we have in the industry globally, this isn't just in one region, is we have, here in the States, we have 550 colleges and universities that have some sort of video game degree. And less than 5, and I would argue probably less than 1% of them teach anything about business and marketing. They're just like, congratulations, you can design a video game, but nobody's telling you how to sell it. So one, when you're building this knowledge internally in the region, you have to have a completely holistic view of it. Yes, Trinidad may be churning out fantastic artists, but if they don't know how to sell their work and they don't know how to approach the industry from a business standard and get in front of the right people who are hiring them, it's not going to do them any good. So anyway, that's my soapbox. When you're looking to go to market, there's two levels you need to look at. One, worst case scenario, if you're building the entire game yourself, you have to assume, this is the whole hope for the best, plan for the worst. You have to assume you're not going to get a publisher and you're going to have to do this on your own. So the minute you have a screenshot, a GIF, a video, anything visually to share, you need to have Instagram, TikTok, social media, Facebook, all of this stuff going on, and pointing that back to a Discord server. because you as the developer need to start building your community the minute you can. That's what you need to be doing, all the way from here's my screenshot up to we're ready to talk to a publisher. You're ready to talk to a publisher when you have a demo to play. Now, how deep that demo is, everybody's definition is going to change. People like to say, oh, a vertical slice. Well, a vertical slice of what? You know, there are so many games out there. How do you take a vertical slice of Civilization or Skyrim or, you know, some of these massive games? But the minute you have some sort of playable demo, you need to start talking to publishers. Now, 99% of the time, when you start doing that with your very first demo, the publisher is going to look at you, smile, and tell you that it's a wonderful thing and it looks great, but they want to see more as you go along. And that's the answer you're going to get over and over and over until somebody actually signs. You can't let it discourage you, but more importantly, you can't let it get you overexcited either, because that's just what they do. You know, if you stand outside of E3 or GDC or Gamescom or any of these conferences on the last day and you talk to the developers that are coming out and you say, how was your show? They're going to tell you it was fantastic. We talked to so many publishers and they love our game, and you know, we're so excited. And 2 weeks later, if you ask them the same question, they're like, nobody wants it. You know, that's the way that publishers work, and investors are going to work the very same way in many cases, because nobody wants to be that company that said, yeah, I looked at Fortnite early on, but it didn't look that impressive, and so we passed on it. You know, we all have those stories. I have those stories of projects that I passed on. But the minute you have that demo, that's when you want to start showing it to everybody and building that list and talking to them, you know, sending it out, saying, hey, look, this is what we're doing. You know, I can send you the deck we have on like what to put in a pitch deck and that sort of stuff. But that's what you want to start doing, but you have to follow up and you have to continue to do it. And I can't emphasize enough, don't get too excited. Don't get too, you know, discouraged. It's a long process. On average, it takes 3 months to get a publisher from the time you send it out to the time you get it signed. Now, I've had that happen in a couple of weeks on occasion, and I've had deals that took 9 months to get done. You know, so there's a lot of variation in there, but it takes time.
And do they usually get feedback? Because I think, especially when you're starting, sometimes you think you have the greatest idea, and then of course you need to get those feedback, and sometimes they do get feedback.
Sometimes you do, but you can't count on it. I mean, it's one of those that what we see is generally a 30%, response rate. You're going to see, if we send out a game to 100 companies and it's a open world RPG, whatever we want it to be, 30 to 35% of those are going to respond in some way, shape, or form. That's not necessarily a positive response, but that's even getting a response. If we send out another open world RPG 3 weeks later to the same 100 publishers, we're going to get a 30, 35% response rating, and it's going to be a different 30 or 35%. I can't explain the statistic, but that's just what we've seen for years and years and years. Some of them are going to offer you feedback. For the most part, publishers are very hesitant to do it because it inherently opens up arguments. And if I come back and I look at your platformer and I say, it looks great, but there's just there's not enough depth in character development, then you're going to sit and argue with me for 3 weeks over why it does have depth in character development. There are publishers out there who are going to give you legitimate feedback. They're usually the smaller indie size because they can relate to you more. They've been there. A lot of these indie publishers respond from indie developers, so they've been in your position before. They understand. But on the whole, no, you're not going to get a lot of. You're not going to get a lot of feedback, and you're not going to get a lot of good feedback. The best place to go and get feedback, at some level, the studios around you, but you have to be careful of that whole friends and family bias. It's like, yes, your mom says you're a great singer. You're not, but she tells you that so she's not being mean. The internet is the best. It's brutal. If people think it sucks, they're going to tell you they think it sucks, and they're going to tell you that you should go back to your job doing whatever you should do. You got to have some thick skin, but if you want honest feedback, you need to go to places like Itch.io, put your demo up there, ask for feedback. So a lot of the indie game communities, especially like on Discord, will give you feedback on your games, but talk to streamers. Go and no, you can't send your game to Ninja and get him to play it, but a lot of these smaller and mid-sized streamers, especially the ones that like to play indie games, approach them. Don't be afraid to reach out and say, hey, look, we're working on this. Can we get your feedback? We used to spend tens of thousands of dollars on a project to do focus testing, 10, 15 years ago. And focus testing is basically what you and I are doing right now. I share my screen, I play the game, and up here in the little corner, there's a picture of my face so you can see when I get concerned or frustrated or also, and that's streaming. That's all streaming is. So we have taken something that we used to pay tens of thousands of dollars to specialist research labs to do, and now anyone with a video camera can do it. So it's important to get feedback, not from friends and family, but from the internet and whole, people who are going to be honest and people who are in some cases going to be overly honest with you, but you can't expect a lot of good quality feedback from a publisher.
And what about the people that develop a game and then immediately place it on Google Play, let's say, and wait for feedback? Is that a smart decision?
My rule going back many, many years is once you've launched the game, don't read the comments because it gets ugly very quickly. Now, obviously you have to, because if there's bugs and there's things that people have legitimate concerns, but you just kind of have to remember that the internet's a nasty, ugly place and people are going to say horrible things about you and your family. It's good that you mentioned Google Play, because the catch with going and putting it on Google Play is unless you've got the marketing money and the user acquisition money, you're just not going to get seen. I mean, there are so many games released every single day. I never recommend an indie small team that's unfunded to do a free-to-play mobile game, because to make those games work, you have to have tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of people coming in and playing it to fill that funnel to get to the 2% that actually spend money on it. If you don't have that user acquisition budget, you're never going to get in the top 500, probably not even the top 1,000 or 2,000 on the store. No one's ever going to find it to play it, and so it just becomes this cycle of nothing. But yes, you need to. I mean, for PC games, I highly recommend going to some of the stores that aren't normal. And by normal, I mean the ones everybody goes to, like Steam, or Epic, or GOG. But you can get really good feedback from going to Itch.io, itch.io, and putting your game up there and asking. It's a much more indie-friendly place, and that's where you can get some good feedback early on. But it is just in general for small teams that aren't well funded, I don't recommend doing a free-to-play game in the first place before you've got financing and someone who's actually paying for that user acquisition.
And well, a lot of people, and certainly in the region, everybody imagines I'm a big developer, I'm going to have a big hit, and I'm going to be famous. But also in Latin America, especially, there's a lot of outsourcing services. So working for other larger companies, and then that outsource the development or part of the development of the game. Is that a good strategy for companies that have the skills but maybe not the resources to launch their own games at the moment?
Yeah, absolutely. You just have to be able to find them to understand who the right person is to talk to at these things, and build from there. Because, and I had this conversation yesterday with one of our clients, because they have put in and looked into, they put a bid in, a proposal to do a project for a very, very big publisher, and they got down to like the final 3. And then a company from China that was much larger, that could undercut them on budget, came in and grabbed the contract. And I said, that was your first proposal that you did for that company. I said, in general, it takes 3 proposals to get your first one taken, because quite frankly, the first time you do a proposal for one of these companies, they're basically looking in and investigating you and seeing how good you are and how reliable you may be. And then they're going to use your bid as a way to bid down the price on the company they were planning on using anyway. So it's not that you're going to get that initial deal done, but it's like I said earlier, you have to absolutely start somewhere. But you also need to be able to have something that you can show. Right before this call, I was on, a meeting with a company who's coming into the industry, brand new, but the company's been around. They've been doing a lot of stuff for a long time. And he said, we're not getting a lot of traction in terms of people looking to hire us. And I said, first problem is when I go to your website, the first thing it says is how you do cloud infrastructure backend, and there's not a single video game company listed on your site. You've got to be able to show that you have experience and understanding in games. It doesn't matter what servers you've been coding for Oracle and IBM, nobody cares. They want to know what you've been doing in games. And even for studios that haven't done anything in games, and they're, the folks that are coming straight out of college and trying to get, into the space, if you can sit and say, yes, this is our very first game, but here's what we played, this is our interest in the industry, this is some stuff that we've done on the back end. You always need to be able to show that you at least have a passion and an understanding for the industry. But yeah, getting outsourced work is always an option. It's still a lot of work, and you still have to show a lot. But it also, the other side of it is we always recommend to our studios, our clients who are primarily looking for, contract work, outsource work, you need something original to show, because that's going to be what gets everybody's interest. We had this happen a couple of weeks ago. We sent a project out from a developer. The team isn't really interested in doing contract work, but one of the publishers looked at the game and they said, look, we're not interested in this game. We want them to do this other project for us. And so it's very important, even when you're going out and looking for, outsource contract work, that you do have something original to show as well.
Right. So if I'm a game developer, or I want to develop that in industries, I need a demo, or
Yes.
And I need a landing page at least with
Yes.
my information, and I need a dedicated marketing strategy.
Well, it's hard to say you need a dedicated marketing team, because there aren't that many studios that have a dedicated marketing team. But you do, one of the basic things, don't send me an email from your Gmail account. If a legitimate company that wants to be taken legitimately needs to have a web page, and your email needs to come from me from the URL of that web page, not from gmail.com or Yahoo or whatever. You also need to have a LinkedIn page for personally, and you need one for the company. You don't necessarily need to have full-blown marketing kits and all that kind of good stuff, but you do need a website, a real email address, and some sort of presence on LinkedIn.
Okay, Alison, you said I don't see the questions, but if you are looking at the questions, can you ask them?
Sure. We have many questions here. One of the first ones for you, Jay, was what are your views on the DRMs? And the next one was, what would be the best way to approach publishers for a brand new game? What's the best way to approach the publishers? I think you would have addressed that in some of what you have said before. But I'll just give you another question that we had from Ronaldo Campbell was, how
wait,
to
let me
start.
do the DR because
Or you do the DRMs? Okay.
I'll get confused very quickly here. So DRM, I don't believe in it personally. I think it causes more problems than it's worth. The reality is, you know, if somebody wants to hack your game, they're gonna hack your game. You know, it's like having a deadbolt on your front door of your house. Yes, it's going to keep, you know, somebody from just opening the door and walking in. But if somebody wants to rob your house, they're still going to get in and rob your house. You know, a deadbolt on the front isn't going to help you. The same thing is true for DRM. There are ways that you can protect your game, you know, in terms of, you know, and mobile games are key for this. One of the reasons that free-to-play games take off is because, you know, premium mobile titles, especially on Android, are pirated easily. I mean, it's just instantly done. But if they have the game, but they still have to purchase stuff, that's going to come from your server and they have to pay that way. So that's one way to get around it. But you know, there's a lot of companies that do DRM. Me, you know, in my experience, it causes more problems than it's worth. You know, the best ways around this I have always seen are the creative things that developers do, you know, to put issues in pirated games. And you can Google it, and there are some hilarious ones where, you know, somebody can get most of the way through the game, but then it absolutely, you know, it just simply won't let you advance any further. And I'm not good enough with code to understand how they did it, but you can Google, you know, developer responses to DRM, and there's so many good examples. But in general, I think it causes more problems than it's worth. You know, we've seen, I remember years ago, like 15, 20 years ago, the Russian PC game market was like literally completely controlled by pirates that were selling, you know, at roadside stands and you know, road shops and basically everywhere. And so we had a publisher that all of a sudden their, you know, sales started like spiking. I was like, Sergey, what's happened? He goes, we literally started selling to the pirates. And I went, it works. Yeah, it drove the volume, it drove the price down, but they were seeing so much in volume from there on out that, you know, it solved the problem. So I'm not a big fan of putting it in there because I just believe if somebody wants to steal your game, they're going to steal your game.
Okay. And the next question was from Hamilton Lambert, would be what would be the best way to approach publishers for a brand new game? As I said, I know we had spoken to some of these, but we can still look at if there are any other points you have to make.
So one, have a demo. Two, do your due diligence, and give me 1 second and I will show you exactly what you need to put in your pitch package. So we actually do a free webinar, and the funny thing is it's not scheduled right now because I'm in the middle of like transferring from one system to another. Let me find my little share screen thing again. There we go. All right, so do you see how to find a publisher?
Yes.
Okay, so we're gonna skip down here to the bottom. This is what you need to put in your publisher deck, so to speak. So you want to have a 10, 15 slide show, basically, who you are, you know, game, image, and screen, an overview of the game, you know, genre, platform, target audience, monetization model, that sort of stuff. 3 to 5 features as bullet points. And then different from the, okay, I have to finish this. I can't touch this until I'm done, okay. Like an hour, okay? Okay. The switch has arrived. So you've got your unique selling points, and this is key. Features, unique selling points, 2 completely different things. Looking at Fortnite, for example. Features, you're dropping 100 people onto an island, they're going to fight to the death. They have different, you know, 14 weapons and 3 armors and all this, those are features. The ability to build a building on the fly and destroy it on the fly, that's your unique selling point. So your unique selling point is the things that keeps your game, completely different than everything else. And it's hard to be completely different, but we'll say mostly different than everything else. Have a page with your story or background. We're not talking about 16 pages of game lore about why the dwarves fought the elves in your world for 400 years. Paragraph. Trailer or gameplay video, because that's what people are going to look at. And the thing about your video is if you don't have that publisher hooked in the first 5 seconds, then they're going to roll over in their eyes. So when you're making your video, don't do a big long intro splash screen of your studio and your logos. Go straight to the action. So concept art and screenshots, but no more than 2 slides. Don't send me 8 slides of different concept art for the same character. I don't care. You need to go and show the gist of it and show that it's pretty, or show your art style, but then move on. Schedule and budget, company profile, what you've done. And this is where I said, if it's not always, if your company hasn't done anything yet, it's not the end of the world, just explain what they've done. And companies care about the team leads. They don't care about everybody at your studio. They want to know who your lead designer is, who your lead artist is, lead engineer, those people, lead producer. Excuse me. Social media footprint. So that's where I was talking about. The minute you have something to show, you want to get it out there, because when we send a project to the publisher, you still have publishers, not nearly as many as you used to, but you still have publishers that if you've launched an early access on Steam, they're going to go, no, we don't want to touch it because they've already launched the game. 3 years ago, that was normal. Now it's not, because publishers come back and the very first question they ask us is how many wish lists do they have? How many followers? How big is their Discord server? All of this sort of stuff. That is why it's key to start building your community day one, because they're going to want to know. And then contact information. So this is what you want to have. And Tana, I'll send you this deck that you can send to everybody, so people don't have to furiously be taking notes or anything. 10 to 15 slides. If it's more than that, it's too much. We have clients that send us, their first deck, and it's like a 30-slide deck, and I'm like, no one is going to sit there and go through that. You need to have 10, 15 slides and then be done with it.
Okay, good. And then this question came from the Bahamas from Ronaldo Campbell, but I think it's a general question that many will like to ask, is that how to start to bring more attention when it comes to gaming to the Caribbean and to the different islands, because I know we have the potential. I know we have the content. We have some gamers out there. How do we bring attention? What could be some ideas to bring attention to the gaming in the region?
So it depends. Are you looking at attention from consumers or from businesses? That's the big question in there.
From Caribbean export, it would be a business standpoint, but I guess for the others, it may be on a consumer as well as business standpoint. Yes.
Well, because a lot of these digital conferences are going to be key to it, and it's expensive for everybody to go. If you have 20 different companies attending, unless they all have the budgets for doing it, that's one thing. But a much more cost-effective range is to have that representative from the area go and talk to publishers about the entire portfolio. It's very much what we do as a consulting firm. When I sit down and schedule meetings at conferences for, with publishers, it's not trying to get them to hire me as a consultant. It's to show our clients' portfolio. And so we sit down and we maintain a company deck that is always available, with a link. And so that's what you need to be looking at from a region perspective. All of the studios need to be doing their fair share. They need to make sure that they're doing promotion and marketing and everything they can do on their own, but their bandwidth is going to be inherently more limited. But having a collective group, be it, a trade organization, something like an IGDA, or anything, having a collective group who can go and schedule meetings, because it's a better sell to that publisher or to that outsourcing company when you can say, hey, look, I want to meet with you about my one company and the game we're making, or hey, I want to meet with you and show you 20 different companies in the Bahamas that are doing games and to see if there's an opportunity there. That second meeting proposal is going to get infinitely more traction. So anything that you can do collectively as a group, whether it's, built internally from reps from the different studios, or if it's from the government standpoint, that's what's going to help and bring that attention. And then, the other side of it is, and this falls under the whole be kind to one another. When you start getting that attention, there's going to be one studio that gets more attention than everybody else. That's just reality. That's the way it works. You have to work together, and I can't emphasize that enough. We do it in between our own clients.
Yeah.
You have to work together to build. You can't get pissed off that somebody got 5 meetings and you got 1. You have to be looking at that company that got 5 meetings and say, okay, what did they do different than we did? And are they seeing opportunities that we can potentially help with?
Mm-hmm.
That's the type of stuff I've seen, in Canada, especially in Winnipeg, for years. It's the studios work together and they communicate. And until you get a big, strong base of AAA teams and triple indie teams, that's what you need to do. It's much easier to go into these meetings with saying, here's 10, 15 companies that we can talk about, than it is to say, just here's mine. And you can spread out the, who's going to what events easier as well.
The other side of that question that Alison made about the consumer, because you talk about the social footprint and how important, and I see another way of by collectively working together in the region and collaborating, we increase that social footprint also for the video games companies. How do we attract those consumers in a way that then we increase the social footprint for the companies?
The beauty is the internet doesn't care where you are. It's not like you have people who are only going to be interested in developers from Jamaica or Barbados. It's much more segmented by language than it is anything else. The beauty of the Latin American market is, one, you can cross between English and Spanish, very easily, and then Portuguese for Brazil. But you've got a huge market that for the most part is underserved, because the reality of the industry now is, and it always has been, is when developers and publishers start thinking about where they're going to source, games and, where they're going to market those games, they think North America and Europe. They don't think Africa. They don't think Latin America. They don't think even Southeast Asia outside of China, and then Japan. And so you have a huge market that you can appeal to, as long as you're going and you're doing it intelligently, and that's where a lot of the cross promotion comes up. That's where, having a great Discord server pops up. The more communication you can get between all of these different studios in your region and in similar regions, the better off you're going to be. Now, the Latin American market is a little further along than the Middle East, North Africa, the MENA region. But one of the things that we see out of the MENA region when we ask, okay, there is tons of money there. I mean, like ridiculous amounts of money when you're talking about places like Dubai and Saudi Arabia. And there's plenty of gamers. It's like, why isn't there a bigger development ecosystem there? And what they always say is, we don't have that studio that we can look to and say, they made a game in Egypt and we need to figure out how to do it. There's no role model studio, but there are role model studios in Latin America. And so you've got more of an advantage there, but it's really about communication and learning, and then getting out there and doing all the best practices for social media, where you're liking and you're engaging in conversations with other folks. And I'll even admit, I'm horrible at social media for my own company, because it's just one of those things. It's like, I know how to market a game. I know how to market a studio. I don't know how to market. How do you market a consulting firm on Instagram? Not a clue. We don't have fancy graphics or anything. But when you get in and you get involved in these conversations and you talk to each other and you support one another on social media, Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, whatever it is, That's how you're going to grow. And it's not going to be overnight, which is why, I said, you have to start the minute you have something to show. When we started our podcast, our Twitch stream, Dan, my co-host, he'd been streaming for years, and he said, okay, we've got to stream. This is 2 years ago. We got to stream. We need to have a Discord server. And I'm like, why do we need a Discord server? There's like 8 people watching us on Twitch. We don't need a Discord server. He said, yeah, we do. And so we started a Discord server. Now that server has 1,300 industry professionals in 2 years. And so it's one of those that it's not going to happen overnight, but you have to start somewhere, and you have to be active and communicating. The consumers don't care where you are. They care if the game is in their language, and especially with cultural fits and things along those lines, that's important. But physically, they don't care where you are.
Mhm. Okay, well, I'm glad you brought that point, because I think it's one of the things we had discussed earlier about the internationalization of the games, and so and it came up in some of the questions that we have here as well, in terms of whether we should only look at the North American market, or what about the Asian or the African markets. I think you responded to that, and something that we've seen here as Caribbean Export talk about internationalization of your games, but the importance of also looking at these other markets, especially the African market, where some of the games are developed under folklore, and they may have a better appreciation of the game than the North American market. So thanks for that response. I think it would have answered some of the questions that have been highlighted here. Tiana, you had a question?
Wait, on the globalization side.
Yes.
Thing to keep in mind is, even in Africa, with as big a market as that is, the majority of the games are in English. So you always need to look at making sure you've got localization in your game, and it can be localized, because that's a huge aspect of it. And it's a way that, depending on what the Chinese government is doing at any given time, we talked to the guys from Megacrit, who did Slay the Spire a couple of years ago. They didn't have a formal Chinese localization in their game, but they made their game available in China, and it got picked up and randomly seen by some streamer, and which exploded overnight. You need to make sure that the game is in your native language, obviously, because that local community is where you're going to get your initial traction. But make sure it's in English, and make sure when you go to publish, if you're self-publishing and you get into the Steam interface or Apple or Google or wherever you are, you click as many options as you can, because games inherently are still primarily played in English. We used to look, years ago, we would talk about, we're going to translate the game into EFIGs, English, French, Italian, German, Spanish, but that's not even accurate anymore. It needs to be in English, it needs to be in Spanish, it needs to be in Chinese, Russian, German, and Polish primarily. Those are the big markets. But your market is going to vary based on the type of game that you have too. This is when you start going into doing your initial research into marketing and culturalization and globalization. You need to look at where your game is popular. And so a game that is big in the US may not be big in Germany. Do your research into the different genres and platforms, and then use that to dictate what you want to localize into.
Okay.
I just wanted, you have said it through the presentation, but about the consistency, the patience and the consistency in trying to get to the market, because and also I remember when you spoke in Lima, you talk about how important that consistency, and I remember they said, if somebody, I insist, and then when they said don't contact me anymore, I wait 6 months and then I contact them again. So just for to drive the point home of how important it is to break through, to have that consistency and that patience.
So, and this is particularly important when you're shopping your game and you're trying to find a publisher. So our methodology here is we send out the original playable and we follow up 1 week later. And if we don't hear anything, we follow up 1 week later. And if we don't hear anything, we follow up 1 week later, 3 times, sometimes 2, usually 3. If you haven't gotten a response at that point, something's wrong. They either don't care, they're not going to respond anyway, or your email isn't getting to them. And so when we talk about how to find this webinar that we do, one of the first things we talk about is getting a CRM, a customer relationship manager. The one that everybody knows is Salesforce. But for God's sakes, don't go out and buy Salesforce. It's gigantic, it's complex, and it's ridiculously expensive. But the reason you want a decent CRM, and you can get them free, I mean, depending on how many you need, just Google small business CRM. Most of the CRMs now have a little icon that tells you when you send an email out through that CRM if it has been seen and if it has been opened X amount of times. And so you don't want to, badger and bother and annoy that person by like sending something every 3 days. But it's perfectly normal, especially in COVID world now. People get busy. I do it myself. This is what I do for a living. And, there's days when somebody sends me an email. It's like, hey, Jay, what about this thing? And I'm like, oh, I completely, it fell through my inbox in the cracks. I forgot. But follow up 1, 2, 3 times. Make sure that it's getting seen. If it hasn't been seen, you need to find a new contact at that, at that company. Find a different way of getting in touch with them. Maybe reach out via Twitter, maybe LinkedIn, maybe Discord. Every publisher who is worth publishing your game has a Discord server. Discord is one of those revolutionary things in games that's happened in the last 2 or 3 years that it happens every now and then. And so it's not only good for building that consumer base, we actually use it a lot for business development. So there are other ways to get a hold of people. But then once you've sent out that build, you can't necessarily send out another one until you have made progress in the game. So when you get that either no answer or they say it looks interesting but show us more, that's when you want to say, okay, so I'm going to do a month or 2 of work on this. We're going to have features. You're going to send it back out to the publisher with an email that says, this is what's changed since the last time I sent you a bill. But yeah, it's a long process. You have to have thick skin because people are going to either ignore you or tell you they don't like it, and you have to be okay with that, and you have to understand, but be patient.
Before we get to the good part and about how we are going to continue to work with Jay to support the video game industry here and the opportunities you have to participate in that, Alison, there's any additional question? Alison?
Yes, we have many more questions. We have a lot of questions here. So
because I don't know why, but I don't see them. So please.
Okay, yes, so I have many more questions. One of them, a straightforward one, was speaking about the prospects for gaming and agro-processing. I thought it was an interesting one. What from Alita Garoe was asking what kind of games are there for the agro-processing, or something like that, anything specific in that area. Also, I know you would have mentioned about publishing, but we seem to have quite a lot of questions, Jay, on the publishing. About, you mentioned it just a short while ago about if you're publishing and you do these different apps. So you're speaking about whether you publish and about self-publishing. If you publish your own game, the processes. I know you already addressed that, but I believe a lot of the questions that I'm seeing here speaks to the issue of publishing. They also, you would have spoken to it about when you did about the pirating, but they asked, what about if you do outsource this as a service provider versus developing your own IP? So a lot of questions around the publishing. So if you could address more the issue of the publishing, how do you address getting a publisher, or if you're doing self-publishing, how do you speak to the issue of outsourcing as a service provider, or if you develop your own IP? I think these are some major areas that you could also address. You also did mention the utilizing of your social media.
Take him slowly because he says a few questions and then.
Okay, so the publishing, whether you do self-publishing or how do you get a publisher, and so along those lines about the publishing, as well as looking at whether you outsource your service versus developing your original IP, some of other questions that they asked.
So on publishing versus self-publishing, the only hard rule that I have is if you were doing a free-to-play game, you need a publisher, because you are not going to have enough money unless you're backed by a lot of venture capital. And even then, you need to have people on the team who have experience doing user acquisition. You're just not going to be successful at it. You know, if you're doing a free-to-play game, whether it's PC, console, or mobile, you need a publisher. End of story. Now, it gets into a giant gray area after that. I do come from a different side of the industry. I've done self-publishing for many years, and so it's easy for me to say it's not hard. You can go self-publish. It's not that big a deal, but it is. You know, if you have never published a game or you've never had a game published, you need a publisher, because it's not only the things that you don't know about it, it's the things that you don't know about it. You know, publishing is going to require a whole lot of marketing. It's going to require a lot of polish. You know, we always say the first 90% of a game is easy to develop. The last 10% is the hardest and it's the most important. And so, you know, there's an episode of the podcast that we did with Junie from Sodesco, and she talks about all the things that publishers do that you don't think about. The things that, you know, you think about, I'm going to get a publisher, it's generally because you want to get funding and you want to have a way to go to market. But there's all sorts of things that they do, you know, everything through testing, through focus testing and mock. There's things called mock reviews, where publishers actually hire professional reviewers who write the articles for Metacritic and PC Gamer and Wired and all this other. They hire them to do a review before they do a review, if that makes sense, because that way they can get an idea from a consumer standpoint of how is this actually going to review at the end. There's a whole lot of stuff in there that publishers do, a good publisher does, that you don't think about. And so if you have never published a game, either, you know, yourself or even had one published, get a publisher. If you've done this before, then at the end of the day, publishing really isn't rocket science. You need to know how to do localization. You need to know how to do testing, and do not skimp on testing. You need to know how to do that. You need to know how to get to market. You need to know how to market your game. Marketing is influencer outreach. You know, it's not about sending the game to, you know, PC Gamer and these websites and magazines anymore. It's about getting your game in front of as many, you know, content creators on YouTube and Twitch and all this other stuff. If you've done that before and you're familiar with it and you don't need funding, then yeah, self-publish. I mean, it's not truly that difficult. But if you've never done it, you need to get a publisher to do it first, so you can learn all the steps involved and all the stuff that you didn't realize you didn't know about. What was the second part?
Alison?
My mic is on. The other part was on whether about outsourcing a service provider versus development of your original IP. What's your view on that?
Outsourcing is a big, gigantic topic because there's so many different kinds of outsourcing. If we're talking about should you as a studio be focusing on outsourcing or your original IP, the answer is yes, both. That's the reality of it. And there's so many studios who, you know, have survived to this day. We've got a client that's been doing outsource work for 20 years. They've done some original work as well, but for the most part, they've just been doing outsource work for 20 years. The good thing about outsource work is that once you get those first couple of contracts, if you do well, it's easy to get them from there on out. The downside is you're very much running a company that's project to project. And if something happens, and it can be anything from a change in ownership at the publisher to somebody had a bad stock market day to all sorts of things that are completely out of your control, then you're dead. Your company's done. You know, and I've seen it happen time and time again. It happened in my first production company. You know, we did contract work for, you know, 2 years with people like Nickelodeon, Disney, National Geographic. And then we tried to switch into original work. The first title did really well, the next two didn't, and we were done. You know, that was it. We're finished. So even when you're going out and looking for outsource work, like I said, you still need to have something original to point to, because that's going to open a lot of doors for you. And so, plus it keeps your team busy. You know, there's no sense in paying a team to sit around while your BD person is out there trying to find a contract for you. They need to be doing something. Have them working on an original game. In that way, you can go and say, the best way to approach any outsourcing studio is, hey, here's the work that we do on art or code or, you know, other games that we've done. This is why we're interested in doing outsourcing for you. And by the way, here's this other game that we're looking for a publisher on. That is the way that you need to approach every single outsourcing company, so they can get a sense of, you know, that you're going to be around, that you're working on something. Because what they don't want to do is sign you to do, you know, art pipeline for the next 6 months, and then realize that you ran out of money and you're gone. And so you're not going to be able to, you know, finish their work or do anything else in the meantime. So the answer of should you be focusing on your original IP or your outsource is yes, both.
Mm-hmm. As one of the questions as a broadcasting, looking into gaming industry, and I think that's what you're going to talk to. They ask about, you know, talking a bit about the export tournaments. So I think it's a good question leading up to the specific about the conference that we have coming up. So they're talking about export tournaments and broadcasting. Is there any insight on that? And then I have a very long one later on for you. But insight on the tournaments.
All right, well, give me 1 second because it's raining and the dog wants in. 1 second.
Okay, sure.
Maybe we can say, Alison, that we okay.
She was scratching at the window going, hey, have you noticed that it's raining and I'm standing outside? So expo tournaments are obviously complicated right now because of COVID. And if you're running a real legitimate tournament, you need to have everybody in one place, because otherwise you have really no idea if they're running an aimbot on the back end or they're cheating or something like that. They're tough to do right now, and it's just that I can't in good faith say, yeah, it's a good strategy. Now, broadcasting and streaming, totally different ballgame. You know, that's something that, you know, there are so many teams that I know that even stream their own game development on Twitch and on YouTube. That is an excellent way to get out there to gain, you know, visibility. And we always talk about establishing yourself as an expert. So whether that's talking at a conference or blogging on Gamasutra or writing stuff on Medium or streaming, especially if you're looking at outsource work, that is a fantastic, you know, way, and it's cheap to get out there and to get noticed. But it's like everything else, it's not going to be instantaneous. We've been doing our stream now for 2 years, and live we may have 30 or 40 people watching. You know, you're not going to be putting up thousands and hundreds of thousands of people watching you initially, you know. But I mean, our show is extremely niche either. We're not sitting there playing Fortnite, you know, we're teaching people about business. So it's one of those things that you have to start somewhere. And the first tip that Indy gave me when we started our stream, and when I first started doing it, I would actually play games while I was streaming just to kind of get used to the fact, because you can't sit there like you normally work. You don't talk to yourself when you're working. When I'm sitting writing emails and working on PowerPoint deck, I'm not commenting to myself verbally while I'm doing it. But you have to do that when you're streaming to keep that audience engaged. And so, you know, Indy told me, he said, you want to make sure you're saying something every 5 seconds. And the other thing is, you never look at the numbers. He said, never look down and see how many people are watching you, because you're never going to have a good reaction to it. It's either going to be too low and you're going to get discouraged, or it's going to be too high and you're going to get nervous. So always assume however many people you want to be watching you are watching you, and do that accordingly. But if you're a art studio, then yes, absolutely. While you're in Maya or Photoshop or whatever you're doing, to be streaming it, one, you're sharing what you know with other people, and two, you're establishing a brand. It may take a while to get that brand going, but it's a good way of getting out there and establishing yourself as an expert.
Okay, great. All right. Another question we had is related to the testing. Persons were asking about how could you market yourself to be chosen for beta testing and such.
So how do you market the game for beta testing?
Yes.
There are actually companies that will do that for you. Discord is a really good way of doing it. Whenever you give somebody free stuff for doing it, that's going to encourage it. And the reality is the people who are the biggest fans of your game are going to give you the best feedback anyway. So yesterday we did a episode of the podcast with Pontus Mahler, who is from Sweden, but now he runs a accelerator and incubator company out of Korea or Thailand, one or the other. And he got started as a beta tester when he was like 14. And we made plenty of jokes about child labor laws and all that kind of good stuff. But the reality is, he said, when you're giving your players a way to have feedback directly with the game, and whether that is through streaming or through Discord or what have you, it's very much a situation of getting people to, it's almost like getting them to buy your game in the first place, except you're in many cases just giving it away for free. But that's where you have to have that community. That's why you have to start building that community at day one when you have your first picture to show or your first video or whatever, because those people had followed your progress all the way from that first video up to something that's playable. They've done it for a reason. They have been a part of that community because they like where you're going with the game, and you can tap into it. So the easiest way to do it is to build that community day one. Always point everybody else, all of your marketing collateral, your social media and everything else needs to be pointing at a Discord server, and then you farm that Discord server for beta testers. There are a couple, and I don't know any, I can't remember who they are off the top of my head, but I do know there are a couple of services, out there that offer beta testers to you. The other thing is, even outside of your own, Discord server, go to other Discord servers. Go to the one for the Indie Dev World Order. There's a ton of great Discord servers out there, and they have channels where you can go and say, hey, I'm looking for beta testers, for our game. Now your response rate is going to be lower there than it is, for people who are inherently understanding the game and they've been fans of the game for a while. But, finding good beta testers for your game goes right alongside building a good community for your game.
Mm-hmm. All right. Well, thank you very much. Thank you very much for this. Some of the other questions I think is between, but no, they have some more for you. The others that are related to Caribbean export or Tiana, I would address. But one of the question was that while it is catered for gamers, they're wondering about how it will also benefit aspiring Twitch streamers and individuals looking to become competitive gamers, or rather, is there any advice that we can give them to these individuals? So what about from that angle? Some brief comments on that.
We joke about this even in this house. When you and I were growing up, if you went to school and said, what do you want to be when you grow up? It was going to be doctor, policeman, firefighter. It was always the standard answer. You go to a second grade classroom now and say, what are you going to be when you grow up? And they're going to go, a YouTuber. That's, they look at it and they feel that it's easy. It's like, I don't need to go to college. I can just like start streaming and it's going to be, awesome. And I'm going to be rich and I'll be just like Ninja and Dan TDM. And it is a lot of work. I would argue that it's easier to be a successful game developer than it is to be a successful streamer. Part of that reason is because the barrier to entry for streaming and to be a content creator is lower. You know, you don't need to understand years of engineering and code or art pipelines for business. You just literally need to know how to play games, have a webcam, and you know, some bandwidth of internet access. There's not a lot of easy tips on how to be a streamer. You, one, need to have a real income outside of it, because you're not going to make money on it for a very, very long time. You need to, again, have that thick skin and not get discouraged, you know, along the way when you don't have that many viewers. But in some cases, it's what I talk about in life in general. When it gets to the point that you're not enjoying it, stop. Don't do it. It's not worth doing, you know, something that you're not enjoying in the first place. And I'm a bit biased in that because I've been running my own companies now for 13 years. And I have friends of mine who I consider to be far more intelligent than I am. Doctors, lawyers, you know, who look at me and go, there's no way I could start a company. And I'm like, if I did it, you can do it. You know, because I had no business experience, you know, aside from what was in the game industry when I did it. But it is one of those things that if you're not enjoying what you're doing every day, and you need to find something that you are enjoying. And the same way with streaming, if you are sitting there and you know, you're looking at it as it's a job and you hate it and it's not fun and you're not making money, stop doing it. Now, if you're hating and it's not fun and you're making tons of money, that's a bigger question in there. But if you're trying to make it, but you're not enjoying doing it, just don't. And that's the reality.
Okay, great. While I let you speak, I would really like you to speak on the upcoming conference in San Francisco. A question I saw coming in there from John Francis, and it's a question we always ask when you're talking about branding and the Caribbean brand. How do you get producers to enter the gaming market? Well, because not only about the gamers as such, but from the music, so that they can use the Caribbean music in the game and game development. You know, some people have beats that they use throughout. So what are the questions we have here? How do the musicians or how the producers actually enter the gaming market? Is there any pointers for them?
All right, so what kind of producer are you talking? We have producers in the game side who are the project managers of the project, but is that the kind of producer you're talking about? Or are you talking
about? Talking about music, from a music standpoint. Okay. Music.
All right, so here's the ugly reality about music in the game industry. It is hard. There are so many people. I would guarantee you, at points in my career, I have gotten an email a week from someone who is creating audio and creating music for games, and they want to know, you know, would my clients be interested in it? In the same, it doesn't mean it's impossible. It just means it's hard, you know, and it's because it is such a saturated market. There are so many people out there that want to do it. We have a client who is up in Chicago, and they do audio for games. The only reason that they're a client is because they have a very unique way of pricing their work. And otherwise, we would not have taken it, because it is very, very hard to get your music into a game. Now, along those lines, if you're creating music and you're a music producer, do not, under any circumstances, fall for that old line of, I'm not going to pay you for your music, I'm going to promote you and the exposure will be worth it. It's bull, for lack of a better word. That's not the way the world works. If somebody doesn't want to pay you for their work, then they don't value your work. Take that time, and this is, you know, if you're a music producer, you're like me. You're the entrepreneur, you're doing something where you're trying to build a market. And here's the rule when it comes to working for exposure. I can spend, you know, 10 hours a day promoting my own work, my job, my company, and 100% of that benefit comes back to me. Or I can spend 10 hours of work creating audio for you for this game for free that you're going to promote, and maybe some of it will come back to me. Where is that 10 hours better spent? It's in doing your own stuff. So it's a matter of perseverance, like everything else in this industry. I'm not the guy who comes into colleges and universities and high school and says, "Oh yeah, get into the game industry. It's great fun and it's awesome." It's hard. It's hard work, and you're going to absolutely 9 times out of 10 make more money in another industry doing the same thing. People are in the game industry because they love it. I've been doing this 23 years. There have been 3 occasions in my career where I have tried to get out of the game industry, and I have walked out of the very first interview I have had in some other industry and gone, that job sounds like it's going to suck and I'll be miserable. And I go right back to the game industry. So you have to have that passion for it. You have to understand it's going to take a lot of work and it's going to take a lot of perseverance, but you absolutely do not fall for that whole, give me your music for free and we'll promote you, because that's a lie. But aside from that, the music's like every other outsourcing thing. It's a lot of going out, talking to people, saying, this is what we do, here's the samples, promoting it online, stream creating the music. Establish yourself as that expert, but don't devalue yourself along the way.
Okay, so let's talk about the indie games business, how companies can participate. We have to announce that Caribbean Export and the UKTP program, the United Kingdom Trade Program, which is implemented by the International Trade Center and financed by DFID, and Caribbean Export are sponsoring a special section within that event for the Caribbean, and we will be selecting a group of video game developers from the region, and some of you we already have contacted and are sending us your links and your information. But please do so. Send us your information if we have not reached out to you already through the coalition of services in the regions, so that we can look at you as participating in this showcase. But we want Jay to explain this event and what can we expect from this year.
So it's a lot like, hold on 1 second real quick. Ethan, make sure you shut all the doors so it doesn't rain in. Thank you. Yeah, it's pouring outside, so I want to make sure the doors are shut upstairs. So we started doing these events, I said 2 years ago, before COVID and all of this hit, because part of it was after trips to places, like I call it the ALS conference. I know that's not how you pronounce it, but this is how I pronounce it. In Lima, we wanted to make sure that studios all around the world, regardless of where you were, had the same access to publishers, outsourcing studios that everyone else did. And you have that big barrier of entry when it comes to cost of going to something like GDC or Gamescom along those lines. So with our events, they're primarily focused on the business. So it's not something where you can go and there's going to be a ton of streamers there to show your game to, and it's not consumer facing, it's all business facing. But you go, like I showed you earlier when we were looking at the list of publishers, there's already, I believe, 300 plus companies signed up, and I want to say 50 or 60 of those are publishers. I haven't looked at the stats, and that's going to go, that's what we have today. That's going to go up dramatically like in the next week or so. The last time we did this, part of it, with more people than normal because GDC had literally just imploded and everybody was trying to figure out what to do. But we had 950 companies at the last one. So it's a good opportunity, and it's a cheap opportunity to get in, introduce yourself, and go and find publishers to talk to, outsourcing studios. Part of what I'll send you, we actually did a special version of a podcast a couple of weeks ago on how to make your studio stand out at a digital event, and it's any digital event, not just ours. And so we do them about once, 3 or 4 times a year. It just comes down to what the availability is and what everything else is out there. But what happens is you go through that interface that I showed you earlier, you find people to meet with, you request the meeting, and when it's time for the meeting, you click a button and you go into a video call just like this. And so you have 30 minutes of uninterrupted time with you or somebody else face to face. You can show your game, you can share screens just like anything else, and talk through. And some of the feedback, and part of the reason I love doing them is if you've ever been to a traditional game conference, especially one the size of Gamescom or GDC or E3, is if you have a 30-minute meeting slot, we're going to meet from 11:30 to 12. One of the people is going to be 5 minutes because they've had to run from halfway across the conference center to get to where you are. And then they're going to have to leave 5 or 10 minutes early to get to their next meeting. So already you're down to, 15, 20 minutes of a 30-minute meeting. And then there's all kinds of people like walking by and distracting, and you can't really have a good conversation. This, you have a straight up half-hour one-on-one interview, meeting, whatever, where you can talk about your company, talk about the games, and even go in and show demos along the way. So yes, I am biased, but I have a whole lot of feedback from a whole lot of developers, who say this is the way they prefer to do it because it's easier. And the other thing is you don't have to know anybody, because that's what we get a lot too. It's like, look, we're new to the industry. We don't even know who to meet with. That's where that meeting system comes into play, because you can immediately go and see, here are the companies that are looking for, audio for their games. Here are the companies that are looking to sign new Nintendo Switch games. All of that is storeable, and you can easily search, and you don't have to know. That's the whole point, is so you can network and meet these people, in a qualified type of way without just randomly reaching out to them.
Okay. So again, you have the opportunity to participate. I mean, you can attend without presenting your if you don't have your product ready. But the ideal is for the showcase for the Caribbean, which we will have in the framework of this. We want companies who have already some product to show, and so those interested, and Alison, I cannot write to everybody, but can you write in the email, your emails and mine address, so that you can send those of you that we have not reached out to and have not sent us your links to your work, please do so. Please send it to us, because we will be working on that. That's your opportunity.
Yes.
But you could also, this is for the special showcase and support, and then there will be a meeting with Jay to coach you a little bit and be better prepared for this. So yes, this is one sector that we, under the UKTP and Caribbean Expo, we will continue to support.
And so on the special session, so what we're going to do, and we can do it one of two ways. It depends on what's better for you all, basically. We can do a session where it's live like this, or we can take, pre-made videos and so host them. But we're going to, invite a lot of these publishers and investors and folks to come and watch, and then we'll present the games and the different companies, and we'll have some Q&A time after that.
Yes, right. That approach. Yes, definitely.
Yeah, we like that approach. So persons who have not been contacted, as Tiana would have mentioned, we are working through the coalitions of services in the industry. So Caribbean Export and the UKTP project is going to support the gamers in the region. So if you have not been contacted through your individual or your national coalitions of service, please send us an email. And importantly, we need to get the link for your games, so that, Jay, we can consult with you. And as Tiana indicated, we'll be supporting at least 10 persons participation in the upcoming indie games. But outside of that, we have other opportunities that through Caribbean Export and the UKTP project that will also continue to support the gamers. And so if we have all the names and all the input, we can be reaching out to you. And, just to underscore, because I saw some of the questions about the support. So we are talking about how we support and what's the follow-up, what's the next step to this webinar. he assisted IndieGames, but to continue with interventions by Caribbean Export. And as Jay would have mentioned, he was at a session in Peru last year, because one of the questions I see coming up was about the connections with Latin America. And as I would have mentioned from the opening, that's where one of our early or first engagements was with Chile. We brought the gamers to Chile in 2016, and we have been doing so to nearly all the different, we did Chile, we did Guatemala, and we did Peru in terms of linking with the Latin America through support by Caribbean Export and the coalitions to get gamers into the Latin American market. And that's where we met Jay last year in Peru. But Caribbean Export, and together with the UKTP project, we will continue to look into and support the development of the gamers within the region. So thanking everybody for their participation today. I'd let Tiana wrap up, but to know that Caribbean Export, we have your information. If you email us, if you don't have it from previously, so that we can be in contact with you and let you know about what's happening. I think an important aspect would be to get you on this one-on-one session. And as Tiana said, I think we like this format if you don't, and we can have that session with Jay and see what you have, and we could work on it and get you into the market, because for us it's about getting you into the market, getting business for you. So we look forward to that. And I think a very important point that came out from Jay that we'll definitely be following up on, we'll be looking at the business of marketing and promotion. As Tiana, we can always follow up on that as one of the training elements, a specific training element that we will have following up on this would be the business and marketing of the gaming that we would look into having another event on. So from a Caribbean Export, I want to thank everybody for their participation and for collaborating agencies, UKTP project implemented by ITC and the Coalition of Services Industries, CARIFORUM Directorate. Just like to thank everyone for their participation, and we need you to contact us as well if we haven't contacted you before. We'll have your name now from the registry, but we don't take it freely to just be reaching out to everybody like that. So just let us know if you wish for us to continue to contact you, and we will share that information with you for you to submit your links, etc., for us to then further engage between you and Jay through the project for development of your games and export potential. So thanks, Santi, and I hand back over to you.
Yes, well, one thing that we have not mentioned, because of course COVID derailed a little bit the timing for that, but the next ALES conference is going to be in Barbados, and yes. It was going to be this year, of course, but this year's in-person events are pretty much canceled. So definitely we are looking at the dates for next year. So as soon as we got that, we will let you know, because that's one of the, of course, video games is one of the elements we always have in ALES, because it's something that the Latin American and the Caribbean region are promoting deeply. So Jay, thank you so much for these sessions. And I think it was very informative, and I hope inspiring for our young, for our all ages video games. And I think, yeah, I think that idea of the age was something that has a lot of potential, because yes, we think about the playbox, all those games, but really a lot of more games have been played with this than with any others, and these are the possibilities that we in the region need to explore more. Well, thank you so much. Please write to us, and we hope you continue to engage with the sectors and with us. I already received some comments. People are very happy and inspired. So thank you so much, Jay, for this.
My pleasure. I love it.
Okay. All right. Okay. Can you tell us about your podcast, so that if people want to get more of that information that you already spoken to?
Luckily, I still have that thing pulled up here. So
yeah, so you can get some more information for him.
All right. So do you see that links thing?
Yes. Yes.
All right. So one, this is the Discord. If you, at this point, truthfully, if you Google IndieGameBusiness, chances are something's going to come up. We've accidentally done some really good SEO there. But that's the link to our Discord server. You are absolutely free to join. It is mainly business folks. There aren't like a lot of consumers in there, but there are nearly 1,300 industry professionals on there at that point in time. It's a very inclusive, a very safe space. No matter how basic you think your question is, ask it, because somebody is going to help you and somebody is going to, give you the answer. And chances are there's a lot of other people who have the same question. You can find our podcast. It's based on anchor.fm, but it's on Apple, it's on Google, it's on Spotify. If you just go to wherever you listen to podcasts and type in IndieGame Business, chances are it's gonna, pop up. The information on the networking event that's coming up is right there at IndieGame.business. And then if you're looking for publishers, go to the publisher list site. It's powellgroupconsulting.com/publisher-list. Put in your email address, and it will literally email you our list of 700 to 750 some publishers around the world. And then as soon as I get the next round of it set up, you'll actually get an email that says, hey, if you want to learn how to use this, we do the webinar that I'm pulling this slide from once a month on how to use that list to find a publisher. But I'll also send Tiana a link. I did a version of it for the big festival in Brazil a couple of months ago. And so we've actually got a video. I'll send you that. It's the same thing. But yeah, that's all the stuff in my email address if you want to know how to find me. But I would highly encourage, folks to go on the Discord and start asking these questions and learning what you can about the business and the marketing side of the industry.
Yeah, just to clarify, you can engage on the podcast and all the things where everybody engaged. But if you want to engage particularly, we are, OKTP and Caribbean Export are working with Jay to hire Jay so that he works for you. But you have to go through us, through the organizations for that particular work. Just for people to have clear. These are, if you participate for the podcast and the discourse, those are things that he does, and accessing the publisher list and all that. But the other work that we are talking is specific for the region, that's something that is going to be through Caribbean Export and UK.
Trust me, you're going to get a much better rate going through the organization than you are if you come to me directly.
Okay. All right.
All right. Well, thanks everybody for the participation. Thank you so much. It's been very active, so a lot of interest. Thank you, Jen and Alison, and we will continue and see you soon. I'm waiting for you.
All the best and stay safe, everyone.
Thanks, everybody. Bye.
Okay, good. Bye.
Bye. I think you have to